The St. Louis region has so much to offer through history and culture, innovation, and affordability. But that's not always the story that gets shared with the world. Tonight on Forward, we're looking at the narrative surrounding St. Louis, starting with what we say to each other. When it comes to conversations,
there's not a lot of city pride, if that makes sense.
About where you're from.
We're losing our sense of community a little bit.
A common theme emerges.
Well, something that I really consistently see is like the residents of St. Louis talk more negatively about the region than people that aren't even from here.
As we talked with people all over the area about moving St. Louis forward, many focused on the narrative that comes from within.
If you can't even talk about your own city in a positive light, what do you think other people are going to think about your city?
Automatically, people are going to have like a negative reaction.
They got to fight through that negative perception about us.
And that narrative, for some people, is part of what divides the region.
There's a lot of separation from south and north or west and east.
The city has different areas where some people believe in it and some people don't.
When someone says, you know, I'm from St. Louis, and then they go, well, actually I live in St. Charles County, people go, well, you're not from St. Louis. I don't buy that.
And as history shows,
it's time for St. Louis to be prouder and louder.
It's a story much bigger than small talk.
Outside of St. Louis, people know three things. They know we have a baseball team named the Cardinals, they know we have an arch in the front yard, and they oftentimes know about some headlines we wish they didn't know about. If St. Louis could introduce itself, it would tell you it's so much more than just the Cardinals and the arch and those headlines. You have to have the pride in place if you're going to do the things to build a better future for St. Louis.
Jody Sal works with the Missouri Historical Society, which started a We Are St. Louis campaign this year in the museum and online.
I am the Gateway Arch. I am St. Louis.
Asking people, institutions, and businesses around the region to promote local pride.
One thing that we love about this is just the variety of places that have taken part.
No matter which city, county, or state you're from.
Having municipalities across the region just drives home that idea that we are all one place.
The push also includes roving exhibits and an online toolkit, encouraging the region to write a news story, one Sal says is vital.
Studies have found that places with the highest place attachment also have the highest local GDP. They have fewer people leave them. They even survive natural disasters at a higher rate.
People seem to notice it too.
If I could wave a wand and magically make St. Louis better, it would probably have to do with connectivity and making sure that different communities can come together throughout the region.
The importance of bridging divides.
I hope that people realize that even if you live out in St. Charles County your whole life, that you're still a part of St. Louis. Don't let anybody tell you you're not.
Through conversations that move the region forward.
We just have to come together as one to make the whole St. Louis better.
Give St. Louis a shot.
Instead of selling ourselves short, I think we need to be more celebratory of our whole entire city, you know? You just heard about a campaign to change the way St. Louis talks about itself. We're also looking at what the region is doing to promote tourism, commerce, and growth. I'm here with Kat Neville of Explore St. Louis, which is a key part of telling the St. Louis story. Kat, let's start with that. What is your role in talking about St. Louis?
My role is to tell that story. It really is kind of reflecting St. Louis as a wonderful place to visit, to live, and to work. Because really, travel and tourism is kind of the tip of the spear when you look at economic growth, because you're not going to move to a place or bring your business to a place that you don't want to also live. So it's really important that, that we really understand that travel and tourism are an incredibly important part of the overall economic vitality of the region.
Part of what Jody Sal talked about in the story we just watched was that idea of place attachment, the idea that we need to form stronger bonds to where we live. How do you form those kinds of bonds?
The best way to form those bonds is through community. And I think that's one of the defining characteristics of St. Louis. And when I bring media in from out of town, they almost inevitably leave saying, you know, Midwest nice is a thing. Like St. Louisans are just this warm, welcoming group of people. And so the idea of creating a connection to place as someone who lives and works here, it's also tied to that feeling of community.
In your work, do you ever run into the same kinds of things that he talked about a little bit, where sometimes the biggest detractors from St. Louis are people who live right here in the region?
Truly, that is something that we hear a lot in our office us at Explore St. Louis. And when we talk to individuals, it's really interesting because we'll say, what do you think is standing in the way of regional vitality? And almost to a person, people will bring up the fact that St. Louisans themselves kind of stand in the way. But it's always the people who I'm talking to don't feel that they are part of the problem. They feel that they're part of the solution. And what that tells me is that there are more people who believe in St. Louis and love St. Louis and are excited about telling the St. Louis story and being part of moving the region forward than the ones who actually are naysayers. A lot of that kind of negative feeling is almost coming from disappointment. When you're looking at, well, we could have done this, but we did this as a region, or, this is what one city is doing and we aren't quite doing that.
What do you do to market St. Louis just on a local level?
Our social media feeds are, they're targeted toward visitors. That is our mandate. But what we find is that roughly 60% of our followers on social are local because they want, just like visitors, they want to know, what should I be doing this weekend? Where should I go out to eat? Social media is one of the most powerful ways that we engage directly with locals. I think that you're going to see that our role locally is going to definitely deepen, and it's also going to become much more broad.
What about outside of St. Louis? How do you market St. Louis to the rest of the world, whether it's in LA or London?
So the way that we market St. Louis outside of St. Louis is very targeted. In the past, we mainly would message to drive markets, so people within a 4-hour drive. But just within the past year or so, we've been looking at fly markets as well. So anyone who's within like a 2 to 3 hour flight, then those flights tend to be inexpensive. So we're looking at different pillars, different ways that we can segment the reasons why people would be coming to St. Louis. Arts and culture is a really big one. The fact that we are the home of the highest number of free attractions of any city outside of Washington, D.C. That's a huge draw.
What can local governments, cities, counties, as well as institutions do to help you in your work and to help that outside marketing to the world?
That's a great question. And I think it really starts with communication. It starts with us sitting down and talking about how we can help those governmental entities, those organizations fulfill their missions, because when they're doing their work well, then St. Louis runs better. St. Louis is a more welcoming, cleaner, more accessible city. I think that it's really important that we play a number of different roles when it comes to the conversation about how to improve the perception of the St. Louis region. But beyond that, I think that a lot of the work that I've seen you producing, in terms of going out and just talking to everyday St. Louisans on the street, and the thing that they're leading with is, I love St. Louis. I love this city. I love the people here. I love the experience of living here. And I think that is the core that we need to be building on.
What can people watching this do to help?
Number one, get engaged. I think the most important thing that we as St. Louisans need to be doing is coming to the table and sharing our thoughts, our perspectives, our ideas in how to move the region forward. We are really going to be working on doing concerted outreach and really listening to the community so that we can start hearing what everyone feels needs to evolve, and then we're going to help facilitate that.
That was Kat Neville with Explore St. Louis. We'll be back shortly with more First Alert Forward.